Welcome to the Chasing Poker Greatness YouTube channel. Today's video is episode 3 in the Strategy Combine series where Coach Brad and myself break down hands from the notes that have the highest impact on your overall win rate. If you're interested in learning more about the Strat Combine, make sure to stick around for the break. But first, this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. John Chai. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Looking forward to today's episode on 2-bet pots IPPFR with bluffs. It's the last of our Tactical Tuesday series on this node before we move on to 3-bet pots in position as the pre-flop caller. So going to finish off this 2-bet pot node today.
Cool. That is until we get done with this series, which should take us a number of weeks considering how many nodes there are to be analyzed and the CPG Strat Combine, which, by the way, I think if you play online poker and you've got a data set of 25K hands plus that you'd like to analyze so that you can figure out what you would like to study, get in there, buy the course. I just think it's worth its weight in gold. So starting out, IP, 2-bet pot, pre-flop raiser with our low equity hands. Hero starts out on the button with a queen and a 9 of different suits. They open to 3 big blinds. The small blind folds. The big blind calls. 100 big blinds effective. Flop is 10-6-4, so Hero kind of blocks top pair and has some backdoor straights available as well as an overcard. And the big blind leads for about 75% pot. They bet 40 into 65. 100 big blinds effective, and here we are at decision point number 1.
Yeah, probably this action reveals a lot about the big blinds player type or what type of player they're likely to be. I think this is a board texture where I would not expect regs to have a leading range, so I think we can be pretty confident that or at least start becoming suspicious that the big blind is likely a fish or I guess a white belt. I think the size is also indicative of white belt nest, like exactly $40, probably not using a hotkey or like hotkey software. Also just a very large donk size as far as donk sizes go, right? Not to say that this is an appropriate board for donking, but even if it was, this would be considered very, very, very large for a donk size. So this hand is actually going to be an example of how we combat flop donks from fish. If you want to learn more about exactly what we were looking for, the data points that we're trying to take into account before turning our zero equity hands into bluffs, make sure you sign up for the Neutralize Flop Leads series.
Yeah, and this actually happens against white belts quite frequently. I think it's like 18% of the time that they lead as the out of position pre-flop caller. So, when you're in this node as the in position pre-flop raiser with a low equity hand and the out-of-position player is a white belt, you're going to get in this situation quite regularly, actually. Like 18% is a pretty big number. So it helps to kind of know what's going on so that you can navigate. So Hero decides to call. I think calling is totally reasonable. We have, again, like I said, backdoor straights, an overcard, and, a pair draw to the 9 that I think is going to be just give us the best hand quite often. The turn pair is the 6, so the board is 10-6-6-4. With 2 clubs, 2 spades. We still have our queen 9 of different suits, and the out-of-position preflop caller bets essentially the same amount of the pot again, around 75%. They bet 90 into 145. In general, it's hard to make trips, I think, is kind of a big part of this. The out-of-position preflop caller's range going to have a lot of gut shots. There's double flush draws available, just many, many different kinds of draws. So, yeah, I think that, what Hero is almost certainly going to do hinges on, the fact that Villain has a lot of unpaired hands in their turn leading range that Hero believes that they can attack by aggressing on the turn and probably the river as well.
Yeah, so this is probably going to look just completely insane. I think if you haven't gotten your hands on the Nuffle course, the Neutralize Flop Leads course. But yeah, we called the flop with Queen 9 high. We're on the turn, having turned no equity, and we are going to find a way to continue with this hand. And what I assume is going to be a surprising manner to most viewers who haven't seen Nuffle yet. We see our hero click the turn to $230 facing the 90 big blind, or sorry, the $90 turn barrel.
Not exactly a click. We're risking like 230 to win around 230. So, to auto profit, we need them to fold more than 50% of the time here on the turn. As well as, we do have some equity. We can river a queen, we can river a 9, and then we can also, potentially bluff the river as well if they do call the turn. So yeah, like basically risking 230 to win 230. So villain needs to fold more than 50% of the time. In this case, villain does not fold, they call. The river's at 3 of hearts, so there's 605 in the pot. Hero has 700 behind. The final board is 3, 4, 6, 6, 10. So 7, 5 makes a straight on the river. 8, 9, 7, 8, 7, 9, all brick for the straight draws, and then the clubs and the spades brick as well. The out of position player opts to check, and now hero's at, another decision point, right? Like I think there's, in my twisted mind, I believe that hero does have some showdown value with their queen high. They do beat the busted straight draws, and they beat some of the lower flush draws as well. So I think there is kind of like merit to potentially checking behind and just realizing your share of the pot, which is probably going to be, I don't know, 10 to 20%. So checking behind is worth like 6 to 12 big blinds probably. But
probably worth a little less when we have a 9 in our hand, right? Because we're checking back hoping that we beat those 7, 9.
Yeah,
8, 9.
Yeah, we would like to have like queen jack, for instance. That would be preferable. If we had ace high, I think ace high is just a slam dunk check behind on the river. But with queen high and blocking the hands we hope they have, I don't mind betting, and it's really just a matter of like sizing selection at this stage. And yeah, we'll just click to what the 1K Wolf did. They bet 180, so they bet about a third on the river. I imagine targeting some like nut flush draws, ace highs, maybe even like a 4, maybe 3, 5. They river a 3, and they can fold.
I think there's actually like a much wide. I really, really like the size on the river, and I think there's like a much wider range because of this player profile, right? Like it's not, it wouldn't be shocking for this player to show up on the river with all sorts of king high flush draws, everything from like king 5 of clubs, even ace high flush draws like ace deuce of spades.
Sure,
they could have just rivered a pair of 3s with, again, jack 3 of clubs or jack 3 of spades, whatever wacky hand they decide to start dogging with. So yeah, I really like the size on the river. I think there's just a huge range of hands that are better than queen high that we can potentially fold out with just a small river bet.
Yeah, and again, like going back to the pot odds, we bet a third. We need them to fold more than 25% of the time, and given the player profile, it just seems quite likely that they fold more than 25% of the time, and they do in fact fold. And they have, what do they have? They have absolutely nothing. The ace of clubs, 9 of hearts. So they were, I don't know what they were doing calling the turn, but if they're going to call the turn, I guess with these types of hands, then the river bet is going to be even better than we suggested, because they're going to just have way too many hands by the river that they can't defend frequently enough.
Yeah.
So,
and these hands, like individually, they just look like complete madness. I mean, like you said, you have no idea what the big blind is doing, what the fish in the big blind is doing. I'm sure if someone watched what we did without knowing that we're following a protocol for countering donks, it would look equally ridiculous, our actions with queen 9. But there is a pattern to all of this madness and the donking, the seemingly random donking strategy that fish have. And that's exactly what the data-driven course neutralized flop leads like just completely counters. And once you get your hands on the course, which you can do without paying, you'll learn exactly what data points we're looking for before we start taking these really aggressive, seemingly crazy looking actions with nothing on the flop and the turn and the river. As promised in the intro, here's a closer look at the CPG Strategy Combine. The Strategy Combine is a database analysis tool that will allow you to analyze your game like a professional, identify where you're crushing and where your game needs work, compare yourself at every major node to the best players in the CPG Wolves CFP, see how you stack up versus the top players on our high stakes team, create an improvement plan based on the specific nodes that most urgently need your attention, Focus your time and energy on the spots that matter the most. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/CPG strategy combine to read testimonials from the beta group as well as register yourself for the next combine. I hope to see you there. Now, back to Tactical Tuesday.
So let's go to hand number 2, where Hero's playing 500 no limit. They open the cutoff with a queen of clubs and a 10 of clubs, queen 10 suited. The big blind calls. Flop is 6-6-4, 1 club. So we have backdoor flush draw and overcards. Our opponent checks. What do you think?
Probably just starting out with a small c-bet with close to the entirety of my range here. Again, this hand is stronger than the average like no pair hand that I have on this board texture, simply because, like you said, we have the backdoor clubs and 2 overcards. So yeah, like the size on flop, I think this is very standard.
Yep, I agree. 1/3, villain calls. Turn is the king of diamonds. So we still have queen high, 44.66 in the pot. Hero's got 478 behind. Decision point number 2.
I would be really excited about barreling this king on the turn. Just an overcard is going to demote a lot of the bluff catchers that the big blind had on the flop. It's an overcard that it's tough to see how it connects with the big blind's calling range all that often, unless the big blind has, exactly king X of spades or maybe a hand like king 4, maybe a hand like king X of clubs. So there's very few king X combos that the big blind's range interacts with, especially when we have a queen and a 10, right? Like some of the hands that might get to this spot, there's a hand like king queen offsuit or king 10 of clubs, that type of hand, and we have a little bit of we block some of those hands a little bit with our queen 10 of clubs. So I would be pretty excited about barreling this turn and just going from there.
Yeah, I kind of go another way. I think when we bet a third on the flop and they call, I think queen high is just the best hand quite frequently on the turn. So like our real turn target here, I mean, maybe we can fold out a 4, maybe we can fold out pocket 5s, but I'm not like holding my breath that we can fold out pairs. So really our major target is ace high. That's a pretty thin target in general. I think that when I check through the turn and they like polarize the river, I'm pretty happy to call with queen high because I don't think they polarize with ace high. And, they can just call the flop with such a wide range of like overcards that queen high, I feel like just has some value just by virtue of, being almost the nut non-ace high type hand. So my preference would be to check behind.
It's really funny that you say that because this is a hand that I played about a month ago, and I reviewed it recently, and I was like, I wonder why. So I don't barrel the turn here actually, and I remember just stopping here and being like, man, I wonder why I didn't barrel this overcard turn. That feels a little unlike me. But it's funny that you mentioned all that because I'm guessing that's the type of stuff I was thinking in game, and you'll see that kind of manifest again on the river.
Okay, so you check behind. It's funny because you're disagreeing with the past version of yourself, but now
I think most of the time, I don't know. Like I guess I was just really in tune with your thought process in game, and most of the time I would imagine myself barreling the turn. But yeah, like I think a big part of understanding how to play your bluffs, or just how to play any part of your range at this node is just understanding like the value or like the equity that your hand has versus your versus villain's range, right? And that's kind of what you're getting at on the turn. It's like our hand actually has really decent equity versus the big blind's calling range, when they just check call a third on 6-6-4. So much equity so that we don't even need to bluff the turn and could potentially bluff catch the river depending on the size they use and what the river is. So yeah, I think that's just having that sort of awareness is a really, really important part of making sure that you are kind of maximizing the way you play your bluffs in 2-bet pots IPPFR.
Yeah, I mean it's recognition that like, oh, I thought I was bluffing, but now I feel like I'm bluff catching. And being able to make that internal switch based on the scenario that's in play here.
Right.
So villain bets a third on the 9 of spades. So final board is 4-6-6, king 9. You have queen high. This is a bluffing episode, so I'm guessing that you raise, but I think I would just call on the river.
I just called, yeah. And you want to just kind of get into how you land on calling the river? Like how how are you kind of deducing that queen 10 high has enough equity to call this river bet here? Because I think on the surface that it does look a little strange or a little thin, especially with the front door flush completing, right? There's a spade flush draw on the flop that gets there on the 9 of spades river.
Yeah, I think there's some reduction in the front door flush because, A, they didn't check raise a flop. I think they're going to check raise a flop at a decent clip with flush draw. B, I can't prove it, but it feels like they're probably splitting their size when they bet a third on the river on the flush completer. Like it seems like they would either probably go one of two ways. Maybe check to go for a check raise, hoping that we can like thin value bet a 9 or king or maybe like 10s or jacks, maybe even like 8s or 7s, so they can get a check raise in. And yeah, so I feel like they're either going to check or bet big. And so this small size, like if we call and lose, I expect to lose to like 4x, pocket 5s, and 9x. I think king x may bet bigger as well. Like I think there may be another spot where they kind of split and put their king x in a bigger value size, targeting our bluff catchers. So I just think it's like, we only need to win 18% of the time here, and it's really hard for them to have 72% pairs and not have more than 18% air. I also don't think they bet their ace high. Like maybe they will occasionally and kind of break our hearts, but I don't think they bet their ace high. I really don't think they bet their ace high with this size. So yeah, for me, like all of that leads me to the conclusion that like queen 10 high just has enough equity in and of itself to bluff catch. And I just don't think they have 72% 9x and 4x and pocket 5 type hands. They're going to have 7-8. They're going to have like club hands, jack deuce of clubs, and who knows, 10-3 of clubs and 10-5 of clubs. They're just going to have a lot of bad hands that are unpaired that I don't think I'm folding queen high or ace high or any pair to this 1/3 bet. And that's another thing too, is like, we have to defend quite a bit of our range here facing this small bet. And so like, it's really comfortable and easy to only defend your pairs and to defend your ace high, and gets less comfortable defending like queen highs. But if you're only defending your pairs and your ace highs facing this third here, you're almost certainly overfolding facing the third. So, it just, for me, it makes technical sense to call the river with queen high based on, all of those variables that are in play.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that I like the most about what you said was just like, hey, is there a world where 82% of his check calling range on the flop beats queen high? That just seems so impossible, right? Like,
yeah,
just really agree with everything you said about like the hands that are going to check raise the flop. And once you eliminate those, just getting to 82% hands that are better than queen 10 high seems like a huge reach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like everything you said there, and I agree with it in game and decide to call the queen 10 and
beat the 8 high
bluff catch successfully versus the 8-5, which is one of the unsurprising hands, right? Like, I mean, I think this hand could check raise the flop, so maybe in that sense it's a little bit surprising, but these are the types of hands that we expect to see when we call the river, when hands like 8-5, 7-8, 5-3, 7-5, those types of hands.
Yep, 3-5 suited, something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice hands, John. Even though it is a bluffing episode, it kind of morphed at the end to bluff catching. But again, it's a really important part of, playing your lower equity hands, figuring out like the relative strength so that you can bluff catch with queen high in spots like this, and you're not investing too much money aggressively with hands that could otherwise bluff catch. So cool. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment about either of the hands. That's all I got for you this week on Tactical Tuesday.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, if you enjoyed what you saw, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to our channel, as it helps us out a lot and lets us know what type of content you're looking for in the future. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.